The foundation of brilliance, early hints of darkness. Leopold Fitz, tech genius, loyal friend. A young man whose mind worked like a finely tuned machine, always seeking to understand, to innovate, to create. His brilliance was evident from a young age, a beacon that shone brightly in the world of technology. These were the labels that defined him. Labels that he wore with pride, yet they were only a part of his story. Yet beneath the surface, darkness simmered. A darkness that was not immediately apparent, but always present, lurking in the shadows of his mind. A flicker in his eyes when confronted with cruelty. It was as if he could see the world for what it truly was, a place where darkness and light coexisted, often in a delicate balance. A coldness that settled when he spoke of control. Control over his environment, over his emotions, over the technology he so deeply understood. These were not the makings of a monster, not yet. They were the early signs of a complex individual, someone who was still finding his way in the world. But they were cracks in the facade, cracks that hinted at deeper issues, at vulnerabilities that lay just beneath the surface, cracks that whispered of vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities that he tried to hide, but that were always there, just out of sight, vulnerabilities that fate would exploit. Fate, with its cruel sense of timing, would find these weaknesses and use them to its advantage. Fitz's early life was marked by a difficult relationship with his father, a relationship that was fraught with tension and misunderstanding, a man of harsh expectations and little warmth. A father who demanded perfection but offered little in the way of support or affection. This left Fitz craving approval, yearning for validation. He sought it in his work, in his friendships, in every aspect of his life. He found solace in machines, in the predictable logic of technology. In the world of machines, there was order, there was control, there was a sense of peace that he could not find elsewhere. But it also instilled in him a deep-seated insecurity. An insecurity that gnawed at him, that made him question his worth, his abilities, his place in the world. A fear of inadequacy that festered in the shadows. A fear that he tried to hide, but that was always there, lurking in the back of his mind. His brilliance was undeniable, a beacon that drew people in. People were drawn to his intelligence, his creativity, his passion for technology. But it was also a shield. A shield that he used to protect himself, to keep others at a distance, to hide the turmoil within. A way to deflect attention from the turmoil within, the inner conflict that he struggled with, the push and pull between his desire for connection and his fear of rejection. He craved connection but feared rejection. He wanted to be close to others but was afraid of being hurt, of being seen for who he truly was. This internal conflict, this push and pull between light and shadow, would define his journey. A journey that was as much about self-discovery as it was about his work with technology. A journey that would lead him to the brink and force him to confront the darkness within. A darkness that he had always known was there, but had never fully faced. The seeds of Fitz's transformation were not sown in malice. They were sown in the fertile ground of his insecurities, in the experiences that shaped him, in the relationships that defined him. They were planted in the fertile ground of his insecurities, watered by the trauma life would throw his way. Trauma that would test him, that would push him to his limits, that would force him to grow. Fitz, the brilliant engineer, the loyal friend, was a fortress built on unsteady ground. A fortress that seemed strong but was vulnerable to the storms that life would inevitably bring. And when the storms came, as they inevitably did, the fortress would crumble. Crumble under the weight of his insecurities, his fears, his unresolved trauma, revealing the darkness that lay within. A darkness that he would have to confront, to understand, to ultimately overcome if he was to find peace. The fracture trauma and the rise of the shadow self. This is a journey into the depths of the human psyche, where light and darkness intertwine. The incident that shattered Fitz's world was not a single event, but a slow, agonizing descent. It was a series of moments, each one chipping away at his sanity, pushing him further into the abyss. Trapped underwater, his brain deprived of oxygen, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. Every second felt like an eternity, a struggle for survival against the relentless force of nature. The logical part of him, the part that clung to reason, began to fray. His thoughts became disjointed, his mind a labyrinth of confusion and fear. In its place, something primal emerged, a raw, untamed force that was driven by a singular purpose: survival. It was as if a beast had been awakened within him, a creature of instinct and desperation. A survival instinct, raw and untamed. This was not the Fitz who meticulously planned and calculated every move. This was a version of him that acted on impulse, driven by the need to stay alive at any cost. This wasn't the confident engineer, the man who could build anything. This was something different, something darker, a side of him that he had never known existed, now brought to the forefront by the trauma he endured.
I hallucinated, my mind conjuring a twisted reflection of my partner, FitzSimmons. She was both a comfort and a torment, a reminder of what I had lost and what I was fighting to regain. This phantom became my anchor, my guide through the suffocating darkness. She was a beacon of hope, yet also a spectre that haunted my every waking moment. But it also whispered to my fears, feeding my insecurities. Every doubt, every fear I had ever harbored was amplified, echoing in my mind like a relentless drumbeat. The line between reality and delusion blurred. I could no longer distinguish between what was real and what was a figment of my fractured mind.
The trauma fractured his psyche, creating a space for something else to take root, a darker, more insidious presence that thrived on his pain and fear. A darker aspect of himself, fueled by fear and a desperate need to survive. This was not just a reaction to his circumstances, but a fundamental shift in his very being. This doctor, as Fitz came to call it, was not a separate entity. It was a part of him, a manifestation of his deepest fears and desires, brought to life by the trauma he had endured. It was an amplification of his own deepest fears and desires, a mirror that reflected the darkest corners of his soul, showing him a side of himself that he had never wanted to see, a manifestation of his shadow self. This was not just a temporary state, but a fundamental change in who he was. Emerging from the depths, Fitz was forever changed. He was no longer the man he had been, but a new version of himself, forged in the crucible of his trauma. While his physical wounds healed, the psychological scars lingered. They were a constant reminder of what he had endured and the darkness that still lurked within him. He tried to bury the darkness, to pretend it never existed. But it was always there, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. But the doctor lurked beneath the surface, a constant whisper in the back of his mind, a reminder of the fragility of his control and the seductive power of his darker impulses. A reminder of the fragility of his control and the seductive power of his darker impulses. It was a battle he would fight every day, a struggle to maintain his humanity in the face of overwhelming darkness. The embrace whispers of Fitz's dark potential. The doctor's presence was a constant torment, a relentless shadow that loomed over Fitz's every waking moment. A devil on his shoulder, urging him toward ruthless pragmatism, whispering dark promises of power and control. It argued that sentimentality was a weakness, a chain that bound him to a past filled with pain and regret. The doctor insisted that true strength lay in control, in the ability to shape one's destiny without the hindrance of emotions. At first, Fitz resisted. He clung to his morals, to the man he'd always been, the man who believed in compassion and empathy. But the whispers were insidious, chipping away at his resolve, eroding the foundations of his beliefs. The world continued to test him, presenting challenges that seemed insurmountable, pushing him to his limits. He faced betrayals, witnessed unspeakable horrors that left scars on his soul, each trauma chipping away at the wall he'd built around his darker impulses. The doctor's voice grew stronger, more persuasive with each passing day. It promised him power, the ability to shape the world according to his will, to bend reality to his desires. The allure of such power was intoxicating, and slowly Fitz began to listen. He found himself drawn to the doctor's promises, the idea of fixing a broken world becoming an obsession.
You can fix this broken world, Fitz. You have the intellect, the vision. With your intellect and my pragmatism, we can be saviors. We can guide humanity toward a better future. We can guide humanity toward a better future, even if it means making difficult choices, even if it means sacrificing your own soul in the process. The weight of these words hung heavy on Fitz's heart, but the vision of a better world was too compelling to ignore.
The transformation was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. A cold calculation in his eyes, a new willingness to cross lines he'd never considered before. He found himself at a moral crossroads, the path ahead shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. He became more distant from his friends, isolating himself as he delved deeper into the doctor's teachings. His actions became increasingly morally ambiguous, each decision a step further into the shadows. The darkness he'd once feared was becoming a part of him, an inescapable presence that twisted his very essence. He looked at his reflection and saw a stranger, a man twisted by ambition and haunted by the whispers of his darker potential. The Dark Messiah, a twisted path to salvation. The world, reeling from one crisis after another, became fertile ground for Fitz's twisted ideology. People craved stability, yearned for someone to show them the way out of the chaos. And Fitz, with his intellect and quiet charisma, offered them a solution. He presented himself as a visionary, a reluctant savior forced to make difficult choices for the greater good.
Fitz's words, they dripped with a terrifying logic. He spoke of order, of control. He promised a world free from chaos and pain, a world where everyone had their place. His vision resonated with those who had lost faith in traditional systems. The disenfranchised, the desperate, flocked to his banner. They saw him as a savior, a beacon of hope in a world spiraling towards darkness.
Fitz surrounded himself with loyal followers, individuals seduced by his promises of a better tomorrow. He manipulated their vulnerabilities, playing on their deepest fears and desires. He became a master puppeteer, pulling strings, orchestrating events to solidify his control. He had fully embraced the mantle of the Dark Messiah. His descent was complete.